purposes to post later? Gotcha. Okay,
We're
there it
recording
goes.
now.
All right. All right, here we go. Todd, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here.
Yeah,
We
we've been trying to
appreciate
get you on for a while. We finally got connected.
Yeah, you're a busy man.
I try to be.
We were looking over your bio that you sent. You've got an extensive, basically
impressive.
full-time military background. You had an encounter while in the military. We'll get into that here in a little bit.
Yeah.
But you've been involved in investigating what we call Bigfoot Sasquatch for over 28 years. It appears like that. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
And you're from the Pacific Northwest, specifically around the Mount Hood area. I read that too, right?
Yes, I live actually in the Mount Hood National Forest.
Okay. I've spent some time up there. It's pretty cool up there for sure. Very dense forestry up there for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But you've also co-founded, it says, the American Primate Conservancy. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, in 2015, my wife and I established the conservancy. It was really a combination of both of our endeavors. She had stalking hominid research. I had American primate, what I call it back then, American primate. Gosh, I can't even remember, but it wasn't conservancy. Anyway, we decided we would get together and just combine our efforts. We both have been researching for many years. In fact, she's researched more than I have, mostly in the Florida area. And so in 2015, we decided let's just combine our websites and our endeavors. And so we started the conservancy on the principle of discovery, which is obviously already happening, research, knowledge, recognition, and ultimately protection for this species.
Awesome.
That's pretty cool.
You've spoken at a lot of conventions. You've been a guest on a lot of podcasts, and we also thank you for coming on to ours. So you've done a lot of talking about this subject. What do you think? Do you think the existence of Bigfoot's ever going to be proven, Todd? Do you think there's some going on there that kind of helps cover this up? You've been in the military. I don't want to throw this at you so quick, but do you think there's some government cover up here?
Well, yeah, yes and no. To get to your original question, I do think it's inevitable that they're going to be recognized because, like I say, they're being discovered quite often, a lot more often than most people outside the circles you and I travel in, literally over 100 times a year. But there's the stigma of ridicule that goes along with that. And so we figure about it, 1 out of 10 actually come forward. So who knows how many sightings are actually happening out there. But it's just a matter of time. We believe that. And to what extent we can have some sort of control over that, we'd like to. And part of that is trying to establish some legal protections for them. And in that vein, I'm working on an initiative called the Native American or First Nations protection initiatives. People have tried many times, both in the U.S. and Canada, to try to get these protections enacted, and we kind of think they're going about it the wrong way. I think the proper way to do it is to work with the tribes. It's part of their culture. And let's face it, we've been in this area, when I say we, I mean Westerners, if you will, for a little over 300 years. And they've been living symbiotically with these creatures for over 19,000 years. So I think it stands to reason that they are much more aware of these. And that's why it's part of their culture. And so we think in working with the tribes, it'll be a little easier sell. It not only protects the animals, but it also supports their cultural beliefs and whatnot, and where they have autonomy on their reservations, they can pass those laws at least within the boundaries of the reservation. So I'm working with 5 tribes right now across the country, including Alaska, to get these initiatives going. And once they do, I think they'll catch on. And then I think down the road, when we have a couple hundred different tribes and reservations across North America, to include Canada, it's just it makes it a whole lot easier to sail to go to, say, the Department of the Interior, who runs the Forest Service and Fish and Wildlife and whatnot, and try to get something passed, because we'll already have established something, at least throughout the continent, with these tribes. As far as government cover-up's concerned, I think a good example of that kind of, I wouldn't call it secrecy, but we just recently have seen the government come forward with Project Blue Book, and some of the encounters that the military has had with UFOs, which is interesting. I think they're going to hold back on some of these items until they feel it's just close to be coming to the truth. And I think the same thing is with these creatures. And my opinion is they've got to put things on a scale. Certainly the government knows everything we know.
Right.
The question is, why are they not coming forward with it? And I think as a leader of any country, really, one has to ask, what are the consequences, whether we come forward with it or we don't? And that's really the choices. It comes down to those 2 choices. And I think they just put it on a scale and say, look, if we don't say anything, then we leave it up to the public to go about trying to find their own answers. And maybe they'll find some that we don't know. Versus if we put it out there as a known fact that the government is aware of it, there stands a good chance that there would be a number of really negative, if not dangerous, reactions that may come from that. So when you put it on a scale and you weigh those consequences, it just probably seems more appropriate for them to let this sit under the radar for now.
Right. Yeah. I know what you mean. Before we go any further, I want to thank you for your service. So you were in the Iraq War, and it says you were received numerous honors from the U.S. Army, and where you served for 21 years. So I appreciate that, and we thank you very much.
My pleasure.
I stopped recording. Hold on just a second, Todd.
Sure.
Brian, we lost Brian.
I saw that.
He just texted me. Let me see what's going on here. I lost my internet.
Oh, great.
Shit. Well, he's so you and I are still connected.
Sure.
Yeah. Let me just.
Do you want to give him a few minutes to see if he can reestablish?
Yeah. Let's see if he can get back on here. I'm sorry about that.
Well,
this is only never happened before. He's always got good internet.
Well, you gotta love technology, right?
Gosh darn it.
Yeah, I picked up 3 more conference invitations here since I sent that.
You are a busy man. I didn't know how to start this interview, and I'm just kind of going through your whole bio here and trying to hit some points I wanted to touch base on before we got too deep into stuff. But you're definitely a busy man. You've spoken on a lot of things. You've done a lot of research. How many encounters have you how many times have you seen?
Well, it's an interesting question because, encounters come in different formats, whether it's the ultimate, which is obviously a visual sighting. Obviously, I've had that happen back in 1993. There's vocalization encounters. There's some physical encounters. There's
Okay,
some
gotcha.
physical encounters, such as we've had some of that what people call tree knocking. We've had trees literally knocked down.
Right.
Some kind of display.
right,
We've had rocks thrown, things like that.
All right, let's get back in. Let me get into
Okay.
recording again, Todd. Let me see. Do you remember what we said before I said I stopped recording because I saw Brian was out? What we're talking about? Hang on just a second, guys.
Well, we were talking about the government suppressing information. Now I lost audio. Brian, it looks like you're muted.
I am. I apologize.
Yeah, we were talking about government suppression of information.
Right.
Okay, I got it. I was just thanking you for your service, and you said my pleasure. So
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
going to
yeah.
hit record, and we're going to jump into talking about your encounter and all that stuff. So, you ready, Brian? You there, bud?
Yep.
You with us, man?
Ready to go.
Okay, here we go.
We're back. We're live. I mean, we're not
All right.
live, but
All right, here we go. So, Todd, you had your encounter when you were in the military. What made you get into the military?
Well, my father was served in the Army. He was actually deployed to Korea. And it was just something that I thought should be sustained in the family. I love my country, and initially I got in as a National Guardsman, so here in Oregon, so that I was a traditional Guardsman, as people I'm sure are aware of. Is you do training 1 weekend a month, a couple weeks in the summer, but you still have your Monday through Friday 9 to 5 job. At the time, I was a vice president of a shipping company and raising a family, and so I chose to go in on the enlisted side as a combat engineer. And for those of your audience aren't aware what we do, our mission is mobility, counter mobility, which means that we try to deny the enemy passage, whatever route they're trying to take, and whether that be destroying a road or a bridge or putting in a tank ditch or wire obstacles or minefields. That's what we did. In mobility, just the opposite. If we run into such obstacles, it was our job to get ahead of the movement element. And a lot of that, as you can imagine, involves explosives. And so I did that for 6 years, from 89 to 2006. And we were actually practicing demolition training on that day, April 3rd, 1993. We were in the Coast Range, in the very northwest corner of Oregon, near a town of Seaside.
I've been to Seaside before. Yeah.
Okay, so basically between Seaside and Saddle Mountain is all private-owned timberland, and we had special permission to get in there 1 weekend a year to do some major explosions. They had a number of gravel quarries throughout their property that we would use to do different types of missions, if you will. That particular day, I remember we had three different missions. We had at the first site we did cutting charges where we would use plastic explosives to cut steel I-beams, similar to what we'd do with taking out a bridge. And then the second site I recall was a minefield that we had to clear a path through using, again, C4. And then the third and last site was a cratering charge. And again, to simulate blowing a road in half to where it couldn't be used. And we had set the fuses on that last explosive, about 250 pounds of ammonium nitrate that we had been soaking in diesel fuel for about 3 hours. And we got up there, we set the fuses, we initiated them, and obviously our SOP at that time is to get the heck out of there. So we got aboard. We had 4 vehicles there, 2 Humvees in the lead, troop transport as third vehicle, and the fourth one was a commander's vehicle bringing up the rear. I happened to be a passenger in that second Humvee, sitting directly behind the driver. And it was an unusually nice day for the coast weather in April. And so, having hunted that area pretty extensively around Saddle Mountain, it was just natural for me to be looking about the countryside, always trying to spot deer or elk or whatever I could see. And so, as our convoy rounded this corner, the second blast site came into full view, some 600 or 700 feet away. And what struck me was, as I looked down, actually in the quarry, there were these 3 very dark figures, and just something didn't seem right about it. I mean, my first thought was, what the heck are those people doing down there? Because you can imagine the security that we use, the safety measures when we're doing this. We we had to block off any roads going in there, even though they were locked off. We couldn't risk having people getting hurt. But that thought didn't last very long, because the more I looked at these things, and I had a very, I think, extensive view, about 25 seconds of uninterrupted view.
How far away were you from these guys?
Yeah. It wasn't one of these 3 to 5 seconds, something ran across the road in front of me things. I mean, 25 seconds doesn't seem like a lot in the long run, but if you just stare at your watch for 25 seconds, it's quite a while. But
how far away were these?
They were between 600 and 700 feet away.
Okay. And you say they were near the second or the last blast site?
No, the last blast site was still cooking off behind us. This was the one that we had detonated about an hour earlier.
Okay.
And I'm looking at these figures, and something just didn't add up. Not only the fact that they were dark black, and they were not wearing any clothing. That would have been easy enough to see from that distance. But their profile was nothing like a human profile. By that I mean the head sat squarely on the shoulders with no real visible neck. I mean, if you could imagine the traps just starting below the ears and going straight out to the shoulders. I mean, these things look like bodybuilders, all 3 of them. They stood 3 in a row, facing us, watching our convoy come down the hill. Barrel-chested. You could see a taper down to the waist, and then these long pendulous arms that extended below their knees, and that wasn't right. And the legs were well out of proportion for humans as well, much longer than ours. But it was the activity that they were involved in that really struck me. And it was the one in the middle, the one is the tallest of the 3, stood there like a statue. But it was these 2 on either side that flanked the larger one, and they were not small by any means. I figure maybe about 7 feet tall. Again, while that one in the middle stood there like a statue, these 2 on either side of the big one were rocking back and forth, side to side. Looked like they were like shifting their weight from one foot to the other, and just kind of doing this action. And in the process, these long arms are swinging back and forth in front of their knees, and they exhibited that behavior the entire 25 seconds I watched them. And then 25 seconds elapsed. We turned another corner, and I lost sight of them. And to be honest with you, I was in shock. you have to understand, I did not believe in these things whatsoever. You can't grow up in the Pacific Northwest without hearing stories of Bigfoot or Sasquatch, but I'd kind of relegated it to a scary campfire story kind of thing, a legend, but not so much true. Well, let's just say that event, that 25 seconds, was an epiphany that it's changed my life ever since. It's just amazing to think 25 seconds and the entire course of my future changed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did the other guys see him?
So nobody in the convoy that I'm aware of saw them. What's interesting though is we had a separate group that would stay one site ahead of us. They would actually prep the site. They would drop off the I-beams, and then they'd go to the next site and set up these anti-tank training mines that we had to then go up and breach a lane through them. And then they went up to the third site and dug a starting hole, if you will, for the cratering charge. So we were split kind of in two parties, if you will. They were down at the safety staging area where we would drive to and wait the explosion out, and then from there we would go back and check our work. And when we got down to that staging area, it didn't seem like it was that far back from where I had seen them, so I just instinctively ran back up the road as far as I dared, try to get a view. And we have a rule. It's 100% integrity. Everybody's accounted for. You have to be. You can't have people missing.
Right.
So I could only go so far, and unfortunately, I strained. I had my hand up to my head. I'm on my tiptoes. There was this dang hill that just was obscuring my view of the gravel quarry. But while I was standing there trying to look off in the distance, I heard somebody yell out my name, and I looked to my right, and here comes Sergeant Martin. And he yells out, "What are you looking at?" And I drop my hands to my side. I go, "Oh, nothing." And Jeff continued to come up to me. I remember he was smoking on a cigarette, and he comes up and says, he says, I'm wondering if you might have seen what I saw down at that second blast site. And I wasn't going to say it, I said, "I don't know, Jeff. What did you see?" And he took a drag off his cigarette, and he looked left and right to make sure nobody else was in earshot. And he said, "Well, I saw 3 huge hair-covered Bigfoot, I guess." And of course, at that, I said, "Yeah, I saw them too, Jeff. Amazing, And Jeff works. His 9-to-5 job was working in the woods when he wasn't training with the military, and he had never seen them before either. So that was, it was nice to have that confirmation that somebody else had seen what I had saw. But frankly, it wasn't necessary. I can't unsee what I saw that day, and if I close my eyes, it's as if I was still there. I mean, I can see them clear as can be.
Did you
go ahead?
Did you happen to have see any detail of the face, Todd, at all? I know it's
at that
quite
distance,
far away.
it was.
Did you make out male or
it.
female or anything like that, or?
No, I assume they were all male just because of their build. But again, I'm only getting a forward-facing profile from them. But just when I compare it to one female that I think we're all familiar with, the one they call Patty from the 67
Right.
Patterson-Gimlin footage, she was quite obviously female. I did not see any sort of breasts, if you will, on these 3. My guess is they were somewhat of a scouting party that came out to investigate why we were blowing up their world. I mean, these were very large explosions that made huge mushroom clouds and minor earthquake, if you will. So they were curious enough to overcome the fear that you would imagine any other animal out there would be going
Right.
360 degrees in any
You would
direction.
think.
And I think that's important to note, because curiosity in and of itself, especially when most animals are going to react negatively to something like that, curiosity is strong enough even to overcome that sort of anxiety, tells me that these things are intelligent.
Oh, yeah.
Curiosity is a form of intelligence. They want to know things, and so they were able to overcome that, and they came around to check it out.
So
I wanted
did
to
it-
add, if I could,
Yeah.
the next training or drill, as we call it, would have been in May. And when May's drill came around, we had 2 more soldiers come forward, independent of each other, and also admitted to seeing the exact same number, same description as Jeff and I had. So it's a rather unique sighting, in so much as multiple animal sightings are fairly rare. They're not impossible, but most sightings are single individuals. Multiple eyewitnesses are fairly rare, especially in combination with the number of animals involved. And then certainly the nature of what we were doing just makes this particular encounter very unique.
So there are 4 of you that saw those 3 creatures that day
Yeah, that's correct.
that you know of.
That I know of. Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
did anyone tell your superior officers about that, or?
No, I certainly didn't, and I was very concerned about going public about it initially. I was not only a family man and an executive, but a non-commissioned officer in the military, and I did kind of wonder if the word would get out and they'd get back to me. I mean, over the years, obviously, especially with the different television shows, documentaries, and public appearances I've been on, it has gotten around the military side, and they've kind of gotten used to it, I guess. They kind of patronize me, I guess, if you will. But I don't know. I've actually had a few talk to me at length, very serious, and people are curious no matter what your profession.
Oh yeah.
You had said before you saw these things, you were really a non-believer, and you grew up in the Pacific Northwest. You would think you had seen or heard of someone who'd already had an encounter, but had that happened before? Had you had any kind of interaction, concern about, knew anybody that said they saw Bigfoot before?
No,
you had your
actually, I
encounter?
hadn't. I hadn't picked up a single book on the subject. I've never watched any of the TV programs that were out before that. I let's just say I was kind of agnostic, if you will. I didn't know if they exist. I didn't really believe they exist, but frankly, I had no interest in the subject at all. So I was initiated somewhat involuntarily, if you will. But in hindsight, I wouldn't change anything. It's taken me on a wonderful journey that very few people get to do, and it's a great adventure.
Yeah, you seem to jump gung ho into this thing after this. What do you think?
I had to make a decision, Brian. It was like, I kind of had to put things on a scale and say, do I, I've seen something historically and scientifically important. Something needs to be said about it, but do I want to be the one? And the consequences to me were a little intimidating. People who knew me personally and have known me for years, they know I'm not prone to go out and make up crazy stories like that. And then publicly, I got to a point where I said, you know what? If I don't talk about this and I know about this, it's almost as if I'm being deceitful about it. And so one day I just said, there's got to be a purpose. There has to be a reason that someone like me was chosen to see what I saw. I could have been looking the other direction. I could have been engaged with the other passengers, but this was like winning the lottery, I guess, when it comes to this sort of thing. And so I've looked for that purpose ever since. And I firmly believe that we're going the right direction with the mission statement of the Conservancy, that I want to make sure that my grandchildren and great grandchildren have at least as good of a chance of experiencing what I've experienced. And, frankly, we don't know what the health of the species is. There's a lot we don't know about the species, but the key things, population obviously being one, but what was their population 100 years ago compared to today, or 1,000 years ago, or 10,000 years ago? Is it declining? Is it increasing? It could be either way, but things like what sort of habitat do they require? Every animal has to have a certain type of habitat and food resources. Are we out there destroying that? And as a result, affecting the health of the species? I don't know. Those are questions we need to know. Right. How long do they live? How many offspring do they have?
Do they have a mating season, or are they like us?
That's those are all good questions, and I hear people say all the time, "Oh, just leave them alone. They're doing fine without us." Just but that's kind of an ignorant approach, if you ask me. I've studied extinction, and it's part of nature, and it happens all the time. But when you go back and study things, animals that we knew about in the 16, 17, 18, even into the 20th century, we have photographs of animals that we knew and proved to exist they're gone. They're just gone. They'll never be back. And extinction is not really defined so much as the death of the last of a species, because there is such a thing as functional extinction. And when you get numbers down below 300 left in the population, well, you run into all kinds of issues with interbreeding and genetic defects and effects on the immune system. And you get to a tipping point, even with several hundred left, that they are functionally extinct as a species. And I just feel that that's my purpose, is to prove they exist, not so much as for my own sake, but for theirs.
Right.
Yeah, you can tell that you've done a lot of talking in podcasts, because you just answered about 5 of my questions within about 2 minutes. So,
okay.
But no, yeah, that's great. What do you think about Bigfoot, Todd? Do you think this thing is? Do you think this is an ape? Do you think this is a lot of people say they kind of look like humans? Do you think these things look like more like apes that you saw? Did they look like a caveman type thing? Was there any human features to these things that you could tell?
Well, initially I kind of fell into the theory that these were something along the lines of a very unique great ape, if you will, or possibly a descendant of the Gigantopithecus, which we know existed in Southeast Asia, and possibly migrated across the Bering Strait when it was called Beringia. And we know certain animals did make that migration, including humans. But I've really come full circle to where I don't believe they're human, but I do believe they're hominid. So what's that mean? They're in the same lineage, like Cro-Magnon or Neanderthal. I think what we're dealing with here, Todd, is we're dealing with a relic species, a relic hominid species that is somehow, through evolution, has been able to be robust enough to still exist. Mm-hmm. And part of that is their ability to stay hidden. So that's kind of where I come down at. I don't, there's something.
Why do you think
I hate to say
hidden?
less than a human, because when we think about IQ, IQ doesn't necessarily. It's not just defined as knowledge or intelligence in terms of what we consider intelligence. They could certainly have a higher IQ than we do, but it's in a whole different category. It's in a natural category. I'm sure they can run circles around us.
Which is probably how they stay hidden.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. I mean, do you think these things, our theory is, or my theory is, always talk about the cave. Do you think they live in caves a lot? Do you think that's how they stay out of sight? Or do you think they're more interdimensional? Do you think there's something like that going on? I don't want to go down that road.
I just saw that head shake there.
Everybody has to talk about it. Why?
No, it's a fair question. I am one that believes that these they're very unique. They have certainly some qualities to them that some I've just only recently discovered that kind of could fall into that whole, what we call the woo factor, people that are into the paranormal aspects of these things. I'm trying to find scientific answers to exactly what people are seeing and how they might misinterpret it as some magical paranormal behavior. One of the things I'm looking at is the very real possibility that this species has, some people would call it an ability to cloak. I think that's, what's cloaking, right? What I think is they have an extremely unique form of camouflage and know how to put it to work, know how obviously just looking at each other, learning from each other, how to employ this. I have seen some hair samples under microscope that are quite startling. One in particular that I've got several photos of. You can imagine a clump of hair, a sample of hair under a microscope, backlit with white light, and I was really surprised to see that a number of the hairs in that sample, perhaps a third of them, were actually translucent, clear shafts of hair, where if there were other dark hairs underneath it, you could literally see the dark hairs underneath it through this translucent hair, similar to fishing line, or what I like to, what I'm experimenting with is fiber optic wire. I've bought about 1,000 feet of it, and I'm thinking, similar to what some dogs have, guard hairs that are a kind of separate layer, if you will. If this species has clear shafts of hair intermixed within their hair, then I would think that hair, similar to fiber optics, would actually absorb both the natural light and colors that are surrounding them, and in doing so would literally make them appear to kind of blur out a little bit, especially if they're not moving. it would be the ultimate camouflage. So I'm planning on purchasing some either real or synthetic hair and taking some photos of it in different positions in the forest, different lighting conditions, and then infusing that hide, if you will, with hundreds, if not thousands, of fiber optic cables, and then repeating the experiment again in different lighting scenarios. But I would think that the fiber optic or the clear hair would absorb and transmit the light and color that surrounds it. So that's something I'm working on currently. I'll have to tell you something though, and I don't think I've really talked about it much on any podcast, but it was an amazing experience where I had been invited to, of all places, Nebraska, by the Omaha Nation to come out to their reservation and go out in the field and do some exploring, and they had some things they wanted to show me. I'd been in touch with them for a couple of years, and I had seen video that was hard for me to swallow. You hear people talk about eye shine, is what most people refer to it as.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those things I'd have to see to believe. Well, I am here to tell you, for 5 nights in a row, we'd go out from between midnight and 3 o'clock in the morning to a couple different places, actually, where my native friend would shut off all the lights. There's absolutely no ambient light, no street lights. We didn't have any flashlights or anything. And he would call to them in his native language. He would yell out, "Aho, gigo," what do you say? "Aho, kage," which means hello, friend. And then he'd say, "Gigaho," which means come closer. And I'll be damned, guys, if I did not see eyes light up in the dark, less than 100 feet away.
Just got chills.
Oh, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, and I intend to get to the bottom of it again through some sort of scientific means. I mean, we're talking not projected light, okay? I mean, that would be antithetical to being able to see. I mean,
you didn't have flashlights. You didn't
nope,
have.
No,
wow.
Absolutely no. In fact, we insisted on it, and a few seconds later, a second set of lights would come on our eyes, and at certain times we had up to 3 of them, and wow. you could see them move, you could see them blink. They were kind of whitish blue. Sometimes they were really bright at times, and they did change color to some extent. We'd see them go kind of like orange to red even, and they'd blink off, and he'd keep talking, and suddenly there they'd come back on again, and you could see them come closer to you. They'd move down the hill toward us at times, and then they'd back off. There's no traffic out there. Again, this was the height of the COVID scare, and they had actually locked down the main town there on the reservations called Macy, and they had armed guards at all the entrances and exits, and wow. Only because of my friend's stature in the council were we allowed to be out after 10 o'clock. So, I mean, that just, for me, it was like, initially I had to ask myself, am I being hoaxed, but there's no way. And not after 5 nights. And then one night we weren't getting a whole lot of activity, so we moved to another place 4 or 5 miles away, and we literally had to drive through a field way out in the boondocks, and again we got the same reaction after being there only a few minutes. In fact, I had asked my native friend, I said, have you ever just tried walking up to him And he looked at me like I was crazy. And he goes, hell no. And I'm like, hold my beer. And I just started walking very slowly down this road. It was fall. It was just in October. I got these leaves crunching under my feet, and there is nothing, no light at all in front of me except these two glowing eyes down this road. And I got about halfway to it before it just walked off. But and then we had one on that same night. We had one circle around and try to get behind us.
Could you judge a height by the eyes?
In pitch blackness, that's really tough because there's no point of reference. Right. Although I did go back there about 3 days into it. I did go back there in the daytime to just kind of investigate this ridge that we were seeing them on. They were big, I can tell you that much. But it wasn't just eye shine alone. I have to tell you, we had a number of vocalizations that came out of the dark along with them.
Yeah, I was going to ask, did you hear any vocals or any smells, anything like that?
No smells, but the vocalizations were extremely varied. One of the first ones I heard sounded, I want to say it was a female because I call her the singer because she came out with this really high-pitched song, I guess. I don't know. It changed in tone. It would be 5 to 6 seconds long, very loud. It would change in tone and volume and then stop. 5 or 10 seconds would pass and she would start up again and sing that exact same chorus again. And she did this 4 times in about a minute. I wish I would have had it on record. But it was, I have to tell you guys, it was really beautiful. It was not scary at all. And there was absolutely nothing that I'm aware of that can make that sort of a sound, and especially at that volume. Another time I have to tell you was really, really fascinating. I think it was the third night we were out there. We weren't getting quite as much activity as we did the first 2 nights, and my friend, who's quite religious, he said, I'm going to do something. I haven't done this in a long time, but I'm going to try something. He said, I'm going to pray for them. I'm going to see if I can pray with them. And sometimes I get some response, and I'm like, what the heck? I'll try anything. So he calls out to them. It's like, oh, okay, I want to pray for you and your family, for your safety, your happiness, and your health. I want to pray to our Creator. And if you want to come forward, please do so. Please come forward as I pray and speak with our Creator. And he starts this prayer. And that was all in English. And we had our heads down, it's just, okay. Okay. So about halfway through this 3-minute prayer from very close range, we hear this. And it did it 4 times, and I'm trying to keep my head down. I swear it was 60 feet away. And it did this, and I'm toning it down. I don't want to blow your speakers out, but it did this 4 times in about 12 seconds. Very loud. This started low and then crescendoed up, and then it stopped. And he went on and finished his prayer. And I looked at him. I go, dude, was that them? And he goes, yep. He said, that was them. He says, I even think I know that one. I've heard him before.
Wow.
So had it not been for the vocalizations, it would have been a whole tougher sell for me. When I went out there in the daylight, I had the singer give me 1 verse, and I knew they were still active. I thought they wouldn't be active during the day, but as I'm walking back to the car, from the complete opposite direction, I heard 6 very rapid fire tree knocks, I suppose. It sounded like wood on wood. Well, it sounded like 2 guys with baseball bats just slamming them together, wooden baseball bats. But it was I've heard tree knocks, and there was usually like onesie twosie stuff, and this was a 6 very loud, rapid successive knocks. And I obviously got the heck out of there. But now, so, I can't remember if it was Brian or Todd that was asking me earlier about how many sightings I've had or encounters.
It was me.
Other than 1993, I'd have to say that I would qualify what I experienced on the Omaha reservation as a visual encounter.
Oh, for sure.
But those are the only 2 incidences, I should say. But I've had smell encounters. I've had one smell encounter, and trust me, that's enough.
I've heard that.
Obviously, found a lot of track evidence and other such things. We've had. I was just up in the an area on the west flank of Mount Hood a little over a week ago. Met up with some other researchers. These folks were right. There's a horse camp on the west side of Mount Hood, and they have horses. And for the last 2 years, they've had some amazing experiences up there. They seem to be very interested in the horses, in fact, and probably a little puzzled as to how something as big as an elk lets a human sit on it.
Yeah.
The whole domestic,
Maybe they're going to try that with the elk next.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, wouldn't that be funny if you see one riding by on an elk?
Right. Right.
They say, hey, if they can do it.
Something.
Oh, my God.
I tell you what, I've been to Mount Hood, and I've walked on some trails up there, and that forest is so dense. I told my wife, I said, if you walk off a trail into that forestry for maybe 20, 30 yards and close your eyes and spin around and you can't see that trail, you're done. I mean, it's just amazingly dense forest. People don't understand.
Well, they just rescued a 14 or 15-year-old boy today. Thank God, he'd been out there for 2 days. They found him along the Pacific Crest Trail about 3 hours ago. Yeah, it's very easy to get turned around, and it's very steep in some places, especially where we were. They get rocks thrown out in the middle of nowhere. They'll have rocks thrown out in the trail right in front of them. They've heard voices that aren't human, chatter, different sounds that. In fact, one night I was out there. I don't know if you know who Joe Beelart is.
I don't think so. Ryan, you know Joe?
Nope.
Joe Beelart wrote a book called The Oregon Bigfoot Highway. That was a good friend of mine, and he was up there with us. He was actually camping outside of our horse camp on a cot. And about 2:30 in the morning, I decided to go out there. I've got one of these Tascam digital tape recorders that I took out and trying to record something. And every camp in the campground was shut down. No lights, no fires. Of course, you couldn't have fires right now, but everybody was sleeping except for me. And I went out to where Joe was, a few hundred feet from the camp, and he was sound asleep. He had a camp chair there, and I sat there, and all of a sudden I start hearing a conversation of sorts coming from the woods. The only thing is, I mean, it was definitely a conversation. The only thing was, it wasn't English, and I don't think it was human. But it was definitely 2 individuals having some sort of a combination, an extremely bizarre. It didn't
What
sound
kind of
like
language did it? What kind of language did it sound like closest to?
I don't know. The guy I was with, Gary, has described it as sounding almost Arabic. I don't know that I could put the same description to it, but it was a language, but I don't believe it was any human language. And it went on for several minutes. I tried to record it, but when I went back and checked, I didn't quite get it. But that was about the only thing that I noticed. They had some more instances when they rode the horses up on Zigzag Mountain. some more or not tree throwing, but rock throwing and whatnot. Last year, Gary, it's an interesting story. Gary rides a electric mountain bike. He's not much of a horse guy, so the wife would run the horses. She races them in endurance races, sometimes over 100 miles.
Wow.
And so she takes them up there to train because the steep terrain builds up their strength. So he would follow on his mountain bike, and this was last year, I believe, and very, very rugged. I mean, he proceeded to beat himself up. He crashed a number of times just trying to make the 14-mile loop. But they get back within about a half a mile of the camp, and they had to cross this river. Well, of course, she can ride the horse across the river, no problem, but he had trouble with this really heavy mountain bike. So she got off her horse and helped him get this bike across this river. And then they continued toward the camp when she realized that she had left her riding crop down on the bank of the river. So she said, "Stay here. I'm just going to ride back down there, grab that crop, and I'll be right back." Well, while he's standing there out in this meadow, this trail goes along this meadow, and the sun had just set, so we're kind of in this twilight area, and he sees this huge figure out in the meadow, and it's doing this rocking back and forth thing, kind of like the ones I saw, and it's looking straight at him at about 250 feet away, and he says it's huge. They've got two huge Arabian horses, and I mean like 16 hands high, and he says, you see the chests on these horses. These are 1,000-pound horses. You see the chest on those? He goes, this thing's chest was every bit as big as those horses.
Wow!
And it's staring at me, rocking back and forth, and all of a sudden it starts moving toward me. And at this time, his wife is down the hill getting her riding crop, and she confirmed all this. He started getting freaked out because it's getting dark. He's by himself, and this thing's moving in on him. And just about the time it got about 150 feet away, I think he said, he hears his wife galloping up. Well, she wasn't galloping, the horse was, but she gets up there and the thing took off. And he's like, "Oh my God, I'm so glad you're here." He goes, "You wouldn't believe what I just saw." And he goes on to describe this creature moving in on him. And she looked at him straight in the face and said, "Oh, I believe you." She says, "I just passed 4 of them on the way back here."
Wow!
She said, "Yeah," just nonchalantly. She goes, "Yeah, there were 2 up above the trail and 2 down below the trail."
Wow.
And she said, "I just kept my head straight and kept riding, but they were right there on either side of the trail, about 50 feet away from the trail." So he thought he had some great story until she showed up. She said, "Oh yeah, I just passed 4 of them."
Leave it to the woman
crazy.
now, do you?
Anyway.
Well, Todd, we appreciate you coming on and telling all this stuff and your encounter and talking about that. What's your big thing you got planned right now? What are you working
what's the
on
next thing you got
specifically?
going on?
If you can tell us a little bit about that before we wrap the show up today.
Wow. I just got picked up for a 7th conference in the next 11 months. I'll be speaking in Idaho next week at SquatchCon, and then I'll be speaking next month in Arkansas, little town of Mena, Arkansas, northwest Arkansas, excuse me. I'm still waiting to hear back on Alaska. There's going to be a conference up in Fairbanks, but they told me they're having a meeting and they've got room for one more. Nebraska.
Are you going to the CryptidCon in Lexington, Kentucky by chance in November?
In November.
Is it November? I haven't made that decision yet. I haven't been asked to speak there, but I go to these things as spectators as well.
Mm-hmm. We're going to be there. We'd love to have you come show up and sit down and talk to us some more.
Yeah, I'd like to do that.
A lot going on and a lot more to talk about and tell us. Just
I'm working with
right?
I'm working with a producer and a writer in Florida. we're talking about possibility of doing a series or a mini series. They just sent me some paperwork on it. And then Doug Hadjasek, who wrote and produced Monster Quest, as well as Sasquatch Legend Meets Science, is coming out with a second Sasquatch Legend Meets Science.
I saw that. Brian, did you see that? He's coming out with another.
Yeah. Well,
how do you pronounce his last name?
Hadjasek.
Hadjasek. Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if it's high check. I've heard it pronounced so many ways.
Yeah. Hajicek.
It's a weird spelling, but yeah.
He contacted me a couple days ago and wants me to be on that program with him. So
awesome.
So there's a lot on my plate, as well as a lot of getting out in the woods and field researching and some of the experiments I'm doing.
That's kind of what I was curious about too. That's awesome.
Oh no, it's my pleasure. I really appreciate you having me on.
Right
Let's
on,
do
man.
Let's do it again.
We'll definitely have to get you on again. You've got so much to share.
Yeah, we got a lot more to cover, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, you take care until next time, and we appreciate it again, and appreciate your service as well.
All right, guys.
All right.
All right. Take care. Good night.
Take care.